Hello. Am I on? I am on. Okay. I have no way to control my... Okay.
Wow.
I am
yes.
on.
That was like...
I have no way
So
to
you could hear me?
I could hear you,
Okay.
but that was like the person that calls saying,
So you can hear me?
I know.
And I could hear
It's
you.
karma.
I don't believe in karma, but this is karma.
And I want to congratulate you because you've
karma.
grown in
I
patience
don't
in
believe
that
in karma,
area.
but this is karma.
But it is. It's a little bit of payback.
Yes.
You just had it. Grown in patience
Yes.
in that area.
Yes.
But it is.
Such
It's
is
a little
life.
bit of payback. Oh my gosh, who's this beautiful lady
Yes.
on the screen?
Oh, have you guys never met? Let me introduce you to
Oh my gosh, who's this
Brian
beautiful
Broderson. This
lady?
is Cheryl Smith. Have you guys never met?
Cheryl Smith.
Cheryl Smith, boy, it's been a long time since I got that one.
Cheryl Smith.
Yes.
You know, it's interesting. I just did a podcast on a woman named Bertha Smith.
Yes.
And I hail from a long line of Smiths that was from South Carolina. And Bertha Smith, who I did on Women Worth Knowing, was from Cowpens, South Carolina. So my family comes from Charleston, so I was thinking maybe I'm not related to Bertha Smith. But amazing woman who went to China as a missionary and served over 40 years in the mission field. And then came back and served the Lord 38 more years, vibrant years. Crazy, wonderful story. We had to do 4 parts. That's how fascinating she was. But anyway, I just wanted to know if I was related to her, but it's the name Smith that got me on that.
How far are those two towns from each other?
I think it's 200 miles.
Okay. How far are those two towns from each
The
other?
Smiths got around. So who knows? Think about it. We used to be the #1 name in the United States, and then to the Garcias. We used to be
Yes.
the #1 Garcias and the Smiths lost out to Nguyen.
Oh, okay. So Smith is, I'm sure Perez is maybe in the top 10 somewhere. I don't know.
I don't know, Brian. I don't think so.
Broderson is right up there, I mean, it's just like every other person has a
Oh, yes. You meet so many of them.
Broderson is right up there,
No,
I mean,
my
it's just
mom's
like every
maiden
other
name,
person
she was
has a-
adopted, but her maiden name was Johnson. My mom's, Catherine Louise Johnson married Charles Ward Smith. So, she went from common to common.
Yes.
Charles Ward
Yes,
Smith.
very true. So we've got
she
Brian
went
and
from
Cheryl
common to
Broderson
common.
here on the program today, and they are taking your calls for the next hour at 888-564-6173. The wonders of modern technology, where even though they are hundreds, thousands of miles apart, we can bring them all together here, and we're doing the show.
Hey, is there still like a big dark cloud over Connecticut?
Today was nice. Yesterday it looked apocalyptic. It really did. And that was from the fires in Canada, which is crazy that the fires in Canada would hit New York, Washington, D.C., this area, considering where they were. But it's the way this stream of air flows in this kind of curvature pattern. We were even getting some of the heat from the fires in Michigan. So crazy. They said 16 states right now have fires going in them. 16 states of the United States have fires, including Texas and California. In fact, I read that some fires broke out in the North Pacific yesterday. In fact, from lightning storms.
Okay, well, here's a really crazy thing about that. So Ed Stetzer, our friend who is in the hospital and bored out of his mind, he just posted, it was a story of back in the 1800s, this kind of thing happened. And because nobody had any way of knowing there were fires in Canada, they literally thought it was the Judgment Day. And so, like, the legislative house closed down, everybody went home to get their lives together in preparation for judgment. And later they discovered that it actually was the fires. And later they discovered.
I think Canada needs another day like that.
It actually was the fires. Well, Canada's like sending the apocalypse our way. It needs to be, kind of stay with them. Like sending the
It's crazy. Yeah, you could really feel it. The air was heavy and your eyes burned yesterday here in Connecticut, which I I would never think it would reach all the way to Connecticut, but it did. Today was clear. You could actually see the blue sky. It's a beautiful place where I'm at. I mean, it's just you could actually see the blue sky.
Absolutely gorgeous.
It is so gorgeous. But I'm telling you, I have never seen so many varieties of bugs in all of my life. There are quite a few different varieties. In fact, there was one, and I looked at it, and Kristen said to me, my daughter, that's a such and such a bug. And, my husband, Michael, used to pick those up, and he was just so fascinated. My son-in-law, who's with Jesus now, he was just so fascinated. He just loved anything that God created. I mean, he loved bugs. He the whole, anything, what do you say, life cycle of just about every bug you could name. And he was fascinated by him. And whenever you were with Michael, you got like an apologetic science lesson, didn't you, Brian?
Yeah.
You got, he would tell you about how interesting this bug was, and he would relate it to God's creative power and ingenious ability in creating.
He was a biologist. He could tell you what was in the stomach of bacteria in your stomach. He was a biologist. He could tell you what was in the stomach of bacteria, which is crazy. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, heaven is so rich, and we feel so impoverished. Heaven is so rich. We're just all, and especially here, in Connecticut, we are missing Michael like crazy. We're just all, and especially crazy in Connecticut, we are missing.
Yep. 888-564-6173 is the number to call us today. You can also submit your questions online. A few ways you can do that. You can use Messenger on the Pastor's Perspective Facebook page, or you can DM us on the Pastor's Perspective Instagram. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, you can scan the QR code there. That'll take you to the Pastor's Perspective page at kwave.com, where you can fill out that form there, and that'll get your question to us. But let's read one of the questions that was submitted online. This one is from Valerie, who writes, "Hi, pastors. I'd like to hear your perspective on dispensationalism, how it came about, how it plays into eschatology. My understanding is that there are three different groups of people: Jews, Gentiles, and the church, which is made up of three different groups of people. Jews, Gentiles, and the church, which is made up of Jewish believers and Gentile believers. I read an article critiquing dispensationalism based on Paul's analogy in Romans 11. Here he illustrates how Gentile branches are grafted into the olive tree after the branches of Jewish unbelievers are broken off. The article states that this is evidence that God makes no distinction between Jews and the church. Is this relevant for eschatological purposes? What would you guys say? And the church. Is this relevant for eschatological purposes?
So,
I think we're asking two different questions there, don't you, Brian? I mean, I would have to divide that into, what is dispensationalism? And I think that would be the first question to answer. And then secondly, I would answer the question whether Jews and Gentiles, she said Jews and Christians are equal, and I think that's where you need to make another distinction. Wouldn't you say, Brian? Christians
well, yeah, but she was, the last part was her referring to an article that she read that was critical of dispensationalism. And so, what that article was saying to me was kind of a key that we need to respond to. What that article was saying to me was so dispensationalism is the idea that God throughout history has worked in dispensation. So dispensation is like a period of time in which God is working in a kind of a specific way. So in which God is working in a there was a man many years ago who had a Bible, like a study Bible, and his name was C.I. Scofield. And C.I. Scofield kind of popularized the idea of dispensationalism in the Scofield Bible. He had, I think it was 7 dispensations or 8, starting with the dispensation, going all the way back to creation. So first of all, you have the dispensation of innocence. So this is a period of time where mankind is innocent with God. And then from there you move, of course, the fall takes place and sin comes in. So then you have a new dispensation, and then eventually you get to the dispensation of the law, say under Moses, and then you get to the dispensation of grace, and then you get eventually to the dispensation of judgment, which is seen in the book of Revelation. So in dispensationalism, the idea is that God set aside Israel. The church is now God's new means through which He is working, which I think is true, and that but yet in dispensationalism, Israel still has a future, and so God will one day bring Israel back into the covenant relationship. And so dispensationalism really sees a distinction between the church and Israel, that even in the future that there's a distinction. And I think some of dispensationalism, I think is right. I think that there are points of dispensationalism that I think go too far, and to make sort of like Israel is the wife of Jehovah or Yahweh, and the church is the bride of Christ, and you kind of have this separating thing, and so it's very interesting. There's lots and lots of criticism of dispensationalism today, and of course in dispensationalism you also have the rapture. So outside of dispensationalism, the rapture pretty much doesn't exist. And so so that's a kind of a brief overview of dispensationalism. And I think the Bible does teach that setting aside kind of some of the more peculiar aspects of dispensationalism, the Bible teaches, and Romans 11 is probably the best and most classic passage of all, that there is a future work that God is going to bring Israel back into the covenant. And He's not going to bring them back into the covenant apart from the Messiah. They are going to come to receive the Messiah. The non-dispensational position, which would be like the position of covenant theology, would be that God has His covenant people all the way through, and there is no distinction, and there will be no distinction. Just now the church is, in some ways, the church has kind of replaced Israel, and everybody now comes in through the church. So there is no future restoration of Israel. I think, even though theologically, for certain reasons, that sounds right, Romans 11 completely contradicts it. So I think Romans 11 is, and I've read, the more covenant people who try to, I think they butcher Romans 11. But I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. Romans 11, there's three groups of people. There's the remnant. Paul identifies himself as the remnant. He's part of the remnant, meaning Jews who presently believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Then there's the Gentiles and the church. They're kind of one in Romans 11. And then there's Israel and the church. And Israel is said to be this, and I think this is the key. There's a group of people that when Paul writes, he says they are the enemies. There's a group of people that the gospel writes, they're enemies. And they're enemies for the sake of the Gentiles, but they're beloved for the sake of the Father. He's clearly talking about the unbelieving nation of Israel. And what he concludes at the end of that is God is going to graft them back in. So yes, he cut them off. But Paul says there, but if they do not remain in unbelief, they will be grafted back in. And that's his whole point, that God isn't finished with Israel as a nation. Now, this brings us to the current situation with the nation of Israel. Is this the fulfillment of that? And the answer is no, not, and the answer is in the fullest sense. No, but I think in order for that fulfillment to take place, the Jews had to come back into the land. So I think that providentially they are back in the land in order to ultimately bring about the fulfillment of the promises there. So sorry, honey, that I just took over. So I'm just so used used to being on my own these days. I just, I forget I have a wife. I'm just
I think, though, that what you said is really good because, people are right now so divided, even in the church, pro-Palestinian, pro-Israel. And I think that where we're at is we want all people to come to the knowledge of Jesus Christ. And I think that the fact is we are for anyone who loves Jesus, and we want those who don't know Jesus to come to know Jesus, because that's the only hope. But I think when you side up politically, it's dangerous. And I know I was when I was in seminary, there was just kind of a down on Israel kind of vibe going on in the class, like they have no right to the land because their right was only biblical, and look how secularized they are. And so I remember raising my hand and just saying, but don't you think this is preparatory to Revelation? These things have to happen. And this is why I am, this is why I believe Israel has a grant of the land, is because, and when has God ever dealt with Israel because they were just so good and